United faced off against Manchester United at Croke Park last night in Ireland, and it ended a 1-1 draw because, and I'm going to open the video with this, and I've got a bunch of notes and stuff that is sort of explaining what happened in the match, and we're going to talk about all of that and what it means for Leeds United going forward. But my very first note is literally result irrelevant, sod the pens, look at the performances, because at the end of the day, as much as I'm sure Boyle Sports would like to pretend it wasn't a cup match. It doesn't mean anything. Let's pay more attention to what actually happened on the pitch as opposed to the after some children did a pitch invasion. So, let's have a little bit of a chat about the friendly match, what it means for Leeds United, look at the back of the pitch, the front of the pitch, and a few individual performances, and ultimately get an idea of where we stand going forward. And, to begin with, I think there's an interesting note to make on the way that our defensive line played in the match against Manchester United, primarily because we didn't see that full defensive line at any point. There was no point where it was our best option at left back, so in this case, let's say the best available option was going to be James Justin, because Goodmanson isn't available. We didn't see Justin alongside Rodon and Muhremovic and Beal and at right back Bogle and James Trafford. Instead, we saw a weird mix match of the various sort of options that we have, where in the first half, we had Bornau, who could be a first-team option, and Bogle, but the rest of it was sort of hodgepodge together, including, for some reason, Chadwick at left-back, which he definitely isn't. And it was a sort of bizarre thing, so it's quite hard to get judgment of what our defence actually looks like, but there are a couple of things that we can note, the first of them being that Muhremovic looked pretty damn good again. He did get very, very, very unlucky when it came to Scum's goal. The through ball sort of slid between his legs. He wasn't able to get his foot down in time to divert it enough. He got a little bit of a touch, but it sort of pushed it more in the path of Xerxes than anything else. But that's more unfortunate than anything else. In terms of everywhere else on the pitch, he did what he needed to do. And in addition to that, there is a sort of system-based thing that we can learn. And it's not the biggest of problems, because it's not likely to be the case when we have that full defensive line in place that is expected to play week in, week out. But there were a couple of times where we were caught a little bit high, far, far too often, where a single through ball in behind would sort of wrong foot us a little bit, and for the most part, like 2 or 3 times, this happened down Chadwick's side, and he's not a left back, so he's not sort of used to reading those passes. But if that continues with our first 11 against Nottingham Forest, either of the times that we play away from home, or even against Brentford when we play against them in our second league match of the season, that could be a problem, because that is a pretty big vulnerability that potentially gets cut wide open if it keeps going into competitive fixtures. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's not even there against Augsburg, but we don't know that for certain yet. However, something that most certainly isn't a weakness at Leeds United now is going to be that goalkeeping position, because Trafford was genuinely excellent. He won the man of the match, apparently, and I think he very, very comfortably deserved it. He made some very nice saves. There was one fairly difficult one where his movement was taking him one way, the shot goes the other way, and he gets down to it anyway, which was very, very good stuff. It was his first appearance for Leeds, so to pop out what was a pretty damn good performance, only concede once against a shot that isn't something that you can really deal with, and play a fairly significant role with your feet was key. I'm going to make a quick note before I get into the with his feet stuff, but you can tell that Leeds didn't really care too much about winning this for sure, mainly because if we did, then it would have been Cairns in the first half, then Trafford, because you would have kept Trafford available for the penalties. We didn't do that, so that tells me that we weren't too asked about winning the game of football, which I don't mind too much, to be honest. Again, pre-season friendly for a cup that doesn't exist. Anyway, with Trafford and his feet, there are a couple of fairly notable things to pay attention to, and that is the fact that we sort of invited a little bit of a pressing trap from Scum. What happens when you are playing out from the back is there will tend to be a player that when the ball goes to them, your opponents will see that as a trigger, and you will start the press the moment that player receives the ball. It seems like what we tended to do was give the ball to James Trafford whilst they were setting up their press and sort of getting everyone in position, and then just wait, because footballers at the end of the day are very, very impatient people. and are not going to wait and wait and wait and wait and wait for minutes at a time for a goalkeeper to pass the ball. Eventually someone is going to make a move and it's going to break that pressing structure. That is something that we seem very comfortable with doing, and we trust James Trafford with the ball at his feet to do that. Even when we were pressed very high, he'd find a reasonably good outball further up the pitch. So I think Trafford is going to make a big difference, not just out of possession and shot stopping, which he's going to do to a very, very high standard, but in possession and helping that build up and destabilising the first line of defence for our opponents, which is the press. Once we get past the press, we get to our strong attacking line, which I have popped down as my next set of notes, because in the second half we really saw the strongest possible version of that front line, including what I thought was a very weird tweak, which was Gnonto at right back, which was sort of fascinating because, yeah, he had to do a little bit of defensive work, but at the same time, Bogle has to do a bit of defensive work, but also functionally plays as a winger a lot of the time. This was perhaps the most telling sign that we've had of what the role of Jayden Bogle will be this season, and that is you're a winger with extra defensive duties, because it allowed Harry Wilson to cut inside a hell of a lot more and basically sit as sort of a faux number 10, hovering between that central area and the right wing, which puts him in a nice little pocket of space, whilst you've still got that player on the outside, whether it is Bogle in competitive fixtures or Gnonto as it was yesterday, able to get to the byline and put in some balls, and he did so incredibly well. You add on to the fact that Calvert-Lewin did his hold-up stuff incredibly well as well. Noah Okafor taking on a man was entertaining as ever. There was one point where he just seemingly got bored, punted the ball 15-20 yards and was like, right, I'm going to beat you in a foot race to this, and there's nothing that you can do. And it worked, and I loved that. And with these sort of four players working together, being Gnonto on the right wing / right back kind of thing, Wilson as the quasi-10 winger, Okafor out on the left, and Calvert-Lewin down the middle, you had a decent flow to it, and it felt like there was a lot more chemistry in the forward areas. Sure, Dan James had a decent game. Brendan Aronson scored a goal, but they didn't feel like they were knitting together quite as neatly as those other players. And there is one slight concern around Harry Wilson, and that is the fact that it doesn't seem like he's properly kicked in yet or hit that form. And without a doubt, I think he will get there. I don't think there's anything that will stop him from doing that, because he is very clearly a very, very good footballer. But it might have been Oscar that said this on Twitter, along the lines of, yeah, Wilson is a very, very good footballer who will produce a lot of goals and assists across the season, because that's a very long time. But he's inconsistent, and occasionally it's not going to go his way, and it feels like pre-season is getting used to the system, and then when chances come, that inconsistency's kicked in. So it's going to be a matter of getting him up to speed, which I think will happen in no time at all, and ultimately using that for pretty damn good performances. Outside of that, the young players, I think, did very, very well for themselves. Chadwick was reasonably solid in a position he's not used to. Alfie Cresswell dealt with the threats incredibly well. I'm trying to remember who else actually played, to be completely honest with you, in terms of the youth players, but there weren't too many of them because, you know, we've got actual depth in the squad now, which is good. But yeah, I think Chadwick did quite well, Cresswell did quite well, and it's all about Augsburg now. Hopefully, please, I'm going to cross every single finger, and I'm going to cross the crosses as well. So this is the crossiest set of fingers you've ever seen. Hopefully, we actually see what the first 11 is against Augsburg. Not only in the first half, but going through. I always seem to think that when you are warming up for a season of competitive football, you need to treat at least one of those games like it is a competitive game. You need to say, right, this is the first 11, we're going to give them as long as we can and see what happens, just so everyone has a chance to knit together, get that chemistry, and ultimately perform as the unit. If we don't get that, it's fine, but that's what I'm kind of hoping for against Augsburg. But we will find out when we get there. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please pop a like upon it, that'd be wonderful, or comment, let me know who your man of the match was, because that'd be quite interesting. And I'm going to leave that one there. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you later. Ow, that one bonked my head a bit too hard. Ta-ra.